Good evening. It is Tuesday, December 31st, 2019. It is 6 p.m. in the capital of the United States of America, Washington, D.C., and you are tuned to the Critical Hour here on Radio Sputnik. Happy New Year. I'm your host, political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist, Dr. Wilmer. For the next hour, we will explore and analyze the salient news stories that are impacting the global village in which we live. Protesters storm U.S. Embassy in Baghdad after Iraq airstrikes. Protesters today stormed the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad after the U.S. launched airstrikes on a reported Iranian-backed militia in the country over the weekend that killed 25 people. The U.S. attacks were in response to a Friday missile attack on an Iraqi base that killed a U.S. contractor. The missile attack was blamed on the Iranian-backed militia Kataib Hezbollah, which has denied it was responsible. This while President Trump this morning accused Iran without offering any evidence of, quote, orchestrating an attack, end quote, on the American embassy as thousands of Iraqis surrounded the building to protest U.S. airstrikes and occupation of the region. Quote, Iran killed an American contractor, wounding many, according to the president. We strongly responded, and wrongly, and always will. Now Iran is orchestrating an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. They will be held fully responsible. In addition, we expect Iraq to use its forces to protect the embassy and so notified. Why fan these flames and why fan them now? For insight, we turn to my first guest. He's a frequent collaborator with all major news outlets and author of City Builders and Vandals in Our Age, Caleb Maupin. Caleb, as always, welcome back.
Sure, and always glad to be here.
Thanks, man. So your thoughts when you first read this story?
Well, first of all, that airstrike that was recently conducted, it was alleged that this is retaliation for a rocket attack that killed one U.S. contractor. A lot of people would like to see the evidence of that, would like to see full confirmation that this group was responsible. But the logic that we're hearing from Trump that, okay, so this group received weapons from Iran, so therefore the Iranian government is somehow directly responsible for everything they do, and somehow we know, without doing a thorough investigation, without really presenting any evidence, that they're responsible for this rocket attack. So that then gives us the right to carry out airstrikes in two different countries, kill 25 people, wound dozens of others. I don't think this all adds up. And now we see thousands and thousands of Iraqis protesting and seizing control of the U.S. embassy in Iraq. And I mean, you have to remember here that, Iraq was a pretty stable country until 2003. And when the United States invaded and overthrew the government. And it's a majority Shia Muslim country. But since the toppling of Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath socialist government, there has been a huge amount of funding of Sunni extremists and Wahhabis. A lot of money from Saudi Arabia and from other places has poured into the hands of extremist Sunnis who want to kill Shia. Shia holy sites have been blown up, and Iran, seeing that there's all this chaos on their border, is doing everything they can to stabilize it. They don't want it to spill over into Iran from Iraq. So they have given a lot of support to Shia Muslim communities to defend themselves against fanatical extremists who have set up shop in Iraq. And that's been going on. And so there are a lot of different Shia Muslims in Iraq who get support from Iran to some degree or other. Some of them are very critical and think that the Iranian government is too radical and they're like moderate Shia. Some of them think the Iranian government are sellouts and are not radical enough, and they're even more radical. There's a wide spectrum of Shia Muslims. Just like not every Baptist is the same.
Right.
Not every Shia Muslim has the exact same religious beliefs, and this notion that every Shia Muslim is somehow de facto an agent of Iran and gets their orders directly from the Ayatollah. This is almost religious bigotry. This is not the reality of the situation. Iran has supported the Shia community in Iraq and has supported the Iraqi government, just the Iraqi government overall, out of a desire to protect its borders from all that instability created by the U.S. invasion that hasn't stopped since 2003. How many years has it been now?
Well, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo makes it clear that the U.S. will protect and defend its people who are there to support a sovereign and independent Iraq. But from what I've read, that's really what is behind fanning the flames of anger and the ire of the Iraqi people is that they don't believe that the United States is allowing them to act sovereignly and independent.
Well, exactly. That sovereign and independent Iraqi government said that the USA absolutely did not have the right to carry out these recent airstrikes and condemned it, right? I mean, if your country is sovereign and independent, and there's another country's troops all over it, and those troops then carry out airstrikes against people in the country that are citizens of your country, that are recognized and legal. I mean, this group that was attacked in both Iraq and Syria is part of what's called the Popular Mobilization Forces. And these are groups that were formed to fight the ISIL terrorist groups, right? It was armed militias that were formed to aid the Iraqi government and the Syrian government and others in defeating ISIL. And this group that was attacked is not considered to be terrorists by the Iraqi government at all. The Iraqi government considers them to be very, very essential allies against the ISIL terrorists. The Iraqi government has cooperated with these folks to carry out anti-ISIL operations. This is a legitimate force as far as the Iraqi government is concerned. And if you have foreign troops from the United States in Iraq to then conduct airstrikes against an armed group that is like legitimate, is like, cooperating with the government, how sovereign and independent is the country at that point, you have to ask, right? I mean, if there were foreign troops in our country and they started carrying out airstrikes against the FBI or airstrikes against the local sheriff of some place, our government wouldn't stand for it. And especially if the government made clear this is not acceptable, but it still happened, we would all say, wow, it looks like our sovereignty as the United States is being violated. So it seems pretty clear here that Iraq's sovereignty is being violated on some extreme level here when the USA is carrying out airstrikes, and it's a very, very bad situation.
That reminds me of a Gil Scott-Heron line. We better warn the Amish because they're about to bomb the Pennsylvanians. Yassin al-Yassiri, Iraq's interior minister, who was on the scene, cautioned the U.S. that the airstrikes would cause a reaction. And this, to me, is eerily reminiscent in Libya of Obama being warned that if he started messing with the folks in the north, there would be a reaction. So it seems as though time after time, the United States gets warned about actions that it wants to take, particularly of a military nature, by folks who understand the landscape, folks who understand the culture, folks who understand the dynamics in the United States. Those warnings fall upon deaf ears. Gaddafi warned Barack Obama, don't do this, man. You're about to open Pandora's box and you will not be able to contain the mayhem that you cause.
Indeed. And I think what people don't get here is that, Iraq, there is a large level of instability, and that these Shia militias that have been formed, the way they maintain their credibility is they defend communities, right? I mean, they're formed in neighborhoods and communities, and the understanding is we're going to support this armed, religious organization because they'll protect us. So if an airstrike is carried out and civilians are hit and people are harmed, and that group doesn't do anything and doesn't respond in any way, that group loses its credibility, right? You have to think about that. So when you have an armed group in Iraq in the Shia neighborhoods and communities, and you carry out an airstrike against them, they're going to have to respond in order to maintain any credibility they have, right? A group like that is not going to not respond. It's not like a government. And that, again, gets back to Trump's narrative. Trump continues to say this is all being directed from Iran, and that is simply not the case. There are a wide variety of organizations here. This is a group that had more ties to the Iraqi government than to the Iranian government. It was part of the recognized popular mobilization forces that were key in defeating ISIL on the battlefield. So the way this is being portrayed, it seems like every time something happens in the Middle East, there is a group of people inside the Trump administration that jump up and say, let's blame Iran for it. We can have a war with Iran. Yes, let's do it right now. And there's this desperation if we can just escalate tensions with Iran, anything to escalate tensions with Iran, right? You look into Saudi oil fields, you look into incidents in the Gulf. Before anyone has any evidence, they just immediately jump up and say, let's escalate tensions with Iran. And it's very scary for the rest of the world. I mean, this could become a very, very serious confrontation.
In reading this story in The Hill and the descriptions of what took place at the U.S. compound, it sounds almost scripted. And what I mean by that is this is a story that we've heard numerous times. First of all, To your point about the government, Interior Minister al-Yassiri says that the reaction of storming the compound, this is one of the implications that were expected. This is a problem, and it's embarrassing to the government. So that's the first point to support what you said about, well, kind of United States, what do you expect us to do when you're in here making us look childish, ineffective, and foolish? But protesters smashed a main door to the compound, set fire in the reception area, leading to the disposal of tear gas and gunfire. But the point here is the forces on the ground protecting the embassy seem to have been able to get this whole thing under control fairly quickly. So it's not as though there's a real imminent threat. It was just some folks in the country that are pissed off. They stormed the compound. The compound got control of it. It's not as though they're hanging people, they're burning people, they're dragging their bodies through the streets.
Well, indeed. Now, one thing that I thought was amusing was that these protesters who went into the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, they did do quite a bit of social media work and film what they were doing. And one of the things that they apparently have unearthed, and is all over social media, is that the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad apparently was violating the U.S. government's sanctions against Iran, and that there were a number of Iranian products in the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Garbage bins, for example, that were purchased in Iran, Iranian-made products that it was completely not permitted for them to USA to purchase them. That this U.S. embassy in Baghdad is full of Iranian goods and Iranian products in violation of U.S. law and U.S. sanctions. I found that to be rather amusing. Yeah, did you see that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. This just exposes to a great degree the hypocrisy behind so much of this. And again, I wonder if this so-called attack was more contrived than not.
Indeed. I mean, I think this is political theater. And in a way, things would escalate a lot more if the Iranian-backed militia started, shooting rockets at U.S. bases or something like that, right? That would lead to things escalating quite a bit. You have a protest, you go into a building, things get rough. That's something that won't lead to a huge international war. The Iraqi government certainly doesn't approve of this activity, and I'm sure the Iranian government doesn't approve of this. You always have to respect the foreign countries' missions and such, but this is something that won't lead to an armed confrontation, we all hope. So we hope, you wonder, right, at this point, if so these folks went in and trashed the U.S. Embassy and made a big scene, and if this can blow over. But there's been so many incidents, right, in the last few months. How many incidents have there been where it looks like the USA and Iran are on the brink of war all of a sudden? It's very, very, very scary. And the craziest thing is this is aiding the elements in Iran that are the least friendly to the United States. During the Obama administration, you had the nuclear deal going on. You had Rouhani getting elected, and you saw it. You were there when I was in Iran as well, and there was a big effort to try and hope that there could be some common ground. But now, with the Iran deal ripped up, with these horrendous sanctions that have just wrecked the economy, hardliner elements in Iran that are very, very hostile to the United States and really, really do feel like the American system is their enemy, are gaining more strength. So this is the opposite. That Obama administration strategy was kind of a soft power strategy. We're going to negotiate while we try to, covertly support reformist elements that'll kind of dismantle the Islamic system there. But this Trump administration policy of escalating and doing everything they can to escalate, it's making lots of money for weapons contractors and Betsy DeVos. It's making lots of money for oil companies by keeping the oil price high. But at the same time, within Iran itself, it's strengthening the Islamic Revolution.
In fact, to your point, quickly, as we get out here, and you mentioned that we were in Iran at the same time. We were there together. And I was out in the street like you were out in the street, and I was lecturing as you were lecturing around the country, and I was surprised by the number of people that would just come up to me randomly once they understood that I was an American, and they would ask, what do you think we should do about this nuclear treaty? Can we trust the United States? What do you think we should do? And these were people that were just honestly trying to get insight into what they deem to be a conundrum or a problem. I was really surprised at the number of people that came and asked me that question.
Well, it seems like Trump has given them their answer by ripping up the Iran deal.
There you go. There you go. Caleb Maupin, as always, man, you are so gracious with your time when we call. We truly, truly appreciate it. Happy New Year to you. Have a wonderful holiday, and we'll talk to you in 2020.
And the same to you, and my best wishes to you and your family.
Thanks, man. All right, folks, you are tuned to the Critical Hour here on Radio Sputnik. I'm your host, Dr. Wilmer Leon. There's more on the other side. Stay tuned.